Just when there wasn't enough going on for Ohio State, the Big Ten decided to drop a 2025 schedule on us. So that is a thing that we can talk about on a Thursday edition of the Podcast Daily. That's Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. It's a 3 Things Thursday. And Berm, what was your first thought about the schedule for 2025, which is clearly the most important thing that's going on right now?
First thought is that I don't know that I've ever seen a schedule stretch where we go for like 2 months with one home game. And that's what happens pretty much between September 13th, Ohio State plays Ohio at home, and then the Buckeyes are off. Then they're at Washington. Then you get a home game against Minnesota. Then you're at Illinois, at Wisconsin, off, and then Penn State at home. So in a 6-week stretch, we're only in the horseshoe once. That is abnormal. But it's cool. I mean, I guess we get to do new things. We get to go to Washington. I'm excited to open up the Big Ten slate in Seattle. I think that'll be a very cool experience. I've heard great things about that stadium and the fan base out there. So I also, I don't want to take all the things, but whoever Ohio State's quarterback is, we knew they were opening the season with Texas. So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens to these rosters between Ohio State and Texas heading into the offseason. And I think because of the transfer portal, because of all of the chaos around college football right now, it's hard to be as excited about that game because we don't know who's going to be on what team. So I think we can feel pretty confident that the Mannings will all be on the sideline of that game along with Matthew McConaughey. But who else?
All right.
We don't know.
Yeah, I had 3 thoughts about the release of the schedule. And so I'm going to cram them all into one thing, which is that Ohio State already knew they were going to open with Texas. Like, that's not ideal, though, when you're talking about a new quarterback. If there was any way that they could have finagled that to have Grambling in Ohio and then build up to a showdown against a playoff contender, that would have been preferable. I think we all reasonably assume that Julian Sayin will be the starter for the Buckeyes, but no matter who it is, it's going to be new. It will not be Will Howard. So that's not ideal. But once you get past that, you do have a little bit of a ramp up. And as you mentioned, you have that off week after those 2 non-conference games, and the Buckeyes wrap that up before they go out to Washington. That's a chance for them to get some experience and get their footing underneath them, no matter what happens. I mean, they may go out and light the world on fire against Texas. We don't know. We don't know what that roster is fully going to look like at that point. But you've got that. And I think that you automatically are going to circle November, the first week in November and the last week in November, because you have Penn State and Michigan. You know what the implications are for those. That stretch in mid-October going back-to-back against Illinois and Wisconsin is no joke. Wisconsin, I don't know what they're going to look like with Luke Fickell, and they're going to have a different quarterback and a different offensive coordinator. But you go to Camp Randall anytime, it's going to be tough. And Illinois is one of the sneakier, more demanding trips and opponents that you can have. They slid under the radar. I love Brett Bielema being one of the few folks returning fire at Lane Kiffin about conference records and schedules and teams that could have got into the playoff, because no one even remotely considered Illinois, which basically had the same resume as Ole Miss. Having those back-to-back, the travel grind, that 4-week stretch starts at Washington, flying across the country to the West Coast, then home, but then back-to-back trips, flights and wear and tear on the body and late nights against teams that are not going to make it easy for Ohio State to play. That is secretly going to be one of the more demanding stretches of the year.
Yeah, it's a very oddly Big Ten West schedule for Ohio State next year, when you have Washington, Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin, Purdue. That is the Big Ten West. So it's odd. I mean, not to see Indiana on there, which is feels like an every year thing. To not see Maryland again. It's a unique schedule. I'm glad we're not playing at Minnesota, and I say we're because we'll obviously be there. So
we have to play.
Then we'd see literally every Big Ten Midwest city in a 5-week stretch. But for Wisconsin, that game against Ohio State on October 18th is like the 6th game of a 6-week stretch that is absolutely brutal for them. I don't know that they'll have anyone standing by the time that game comes around. But I want to just read this off to people who have not seen this. Wisconsin on September 13th has Alabama in Tuscaloosa. then they get Maryland at home, then they're at Michigan, then they have Iowa, then they have Ohio State, and then they have Oregon in Oregon. Like, that is a brutal stretch for Luke Fickell's team. And so I think you get at least a softened up batch there if you're Ohio State, and looking forward to how you fight through that. The good news for the Buckeyes is that there's an off week after the Wisconsin game, after the back-to-back trips to Illinois and Wisconsin before Penn State. So that is not something that's typically broken down in Ohio State's favor in the past, where you get an off week before a big game. But you are getting one before having to host Penn State. So at least you get an opportunity to mend some body parts or heal some wounds at that point.
Yeah. It seemed too obvious, so I didn't even ask like which road trip you were most looking forward to. Washington is obviously the answer, and that opportunity was supposed to come previously for Ohio State, but we'll be out there on September 27th. That kicks off Big Ten play. Like, I think that's going to be pretty unique and cool, and I'm hoping that it is a much better experience than Oregon was.
Yeah, Seattle should be a little bit easier for a number of reasons. It's a professional stadium, so you know that they have at least an idea of what they're doing around there, you think. But it's
professional.
Yeah. Don't they play at the Seahawks Stadium? Or do they play on campus?
They play at Husky Stadium.
Whatever. I'm sure they're professional. I really thought they played at the where the Seahawks play. Did they do that for a while? Did they just host a few games there? Whatever. Who cares? I'm excited for that trip regardless. I like Washington. It's one of a throwback to 1993. The first Ohio State game I ever attended in my life was Ohio State hosting Washington in 1993. Ooh. So it's a little, full circle moment. But that, and we had a really great time in Wisconsin. It gives us a chance to go back and get some really good beers in that part of the country, which we love. Good cheese curds, and then of course we have the awful trips like Illinois and Purdue and Ann Arbor all at once. So yeah, it's a weird schedule.
All the rest of them, which are not quite as appealing. I can't wait to actually eat more food in Wisconsin this time around. That's going to be great. All right, thing number 2. Let's get back to the college football playoff. What is one thing about these Buckeyes that it has nothing to do with the offensive line or Jeremiah Smith? So things that we haven't talked about this week that you think are things we need to talk about.
It's Sonny Styles and Cody Simon, who have played great football in the last month. With Dylan Sampson at running back, the Tennessee is going to try and out physical Ohio State up front because they've seen the blueprint. If you can just, what Michigan did, try to wear down the Buckeyes in the middle of the defense. And I think that Sonny Styles and Cody Simon will be in a position where they're going to be forced to make a lot of plays. And I think if it comes down to that, you can feel confident in those two guys. They've made a lot of plays. But they've played an exceptional level for the last 6 weeks. And I think it's a matchup that actually suits Ohio State pretty well. Tennessee likes to, go kind of a spread them out and throw it vertical and then hit the run game up the middle. So you need those fast, twitchy linebackers that are able to read and react quickly. And if there's a matchup outside of the trenches that I think matters, it's the one directly beyond it. And that's the linebackers versus Dylan Sampson. So to me, it's Sonny and Cody. But also I think it's an opportunity for those guys to, I think they can affect the game and be a major reason why Ohio State wins against Tennessee.
Unfortunately or fortunately, I am very in tune with Tennessee coverage. I have a lot of friends that still cover that team, a lot of people that I used to work with that cover the Vols and have never left Knoxville. So I see a lot of their work, and I'm not talking about any one of them in specific here, but there is this notion that Tennessee is going to be able to come into the horseshoe and run the football in Ohio State, which I just cannot for the life of me understand why they believe that. I think when we look back at the fourth quarter of what happened in the game, there was the one missed tackle and one 3rd and 6 conversion from Khalil Mullings that may have put a damper on the entire afternoon, maybe overshadowed everything else. Ohio State was stopping the run as well as they have in multiple years, and they've been above average to very good or elite already. They were so good in that game, but not perfect. I wouldn't suggest that they were, but Cody Simon, Sonny Styles, I think have continued to elevate there were still games where they missed a couple tackles. Think about Northwestern, for example, Nebraska, where there's some plays that got away from them. The one that happened there with Mullings was actually like Ty Hamilton and Jack Sawyer had looks at him and got a piece of him and didn't get him down. That's not to point a finger at them because they played great in that game too. And Jack Sawyer had the interception before that. Like they had phenomenal games. The point is, I don't know where this notion in the South has come from that Tennessee is going to be able to run the football in Ohio State. It makes me think that they haven't watched the way that the Buckeyes are built on defense at all, which, to be fair, they shouldn't. Like, they don't usually play each other.
Yeah, but I think it stems more from the fact that if my brief look at the statistics here are accurate, Tennessee leads all Power 4 teams in yards per game on the ground at 232 yards a game rushing.
You have to look. Tennessee's stats are like crazily skewed by the level of competition.
Well, yeah, I mean, they won their first 3 games 191 to 13. So a lot of those numbers are skewed from that, but I think it's just a matter of being confident in what they have. And I think some of it is also Tennessee fans, media, et cetera, knowing that that's what they have to do if they're going to come out of this game with a win, because Nico Iamaleava, or however you pronounce his name, has been so inconsistent this season. I think that if Tennessee is going to win this game against Ohio State, in my opinion, and not that they want to hear it, but I think you have to attack Ohio State the way Oregon did and take shots down the field just over and over. And then you can soften up the middle of the Buckeye defense. Because if they're just going to come out and try to run it, I mean, yeah, Khalil Mullings ended up with 34 carries or something like that and softened up the defense by the time the last 5 minutes of the game came. I just don't think you can count on that. And especially because Ohio State's proven and shown an ability to, with Arvell Reese and Cody Simon and Sonny Styles, shown an ability to really change their defense on the fly. That seems like it would play play directly opposite of Tennessee's strength. So I don't know that that's the plan I would have if I was Tennessee. But it's the 232 yards a game on the ground, I think, that they are looking at and banking on. And Dylan Sampson leading the SEC in rushing yards this year is, he had a pretty darn good season.
Do you have that pulled up just as the total, or do you have the game by game log in front of you?
As the total. So they're the highest ranked in the country as far as, the yards per game. If you look at Sampson in big games, I mean, he had 101 and 19 carries against Georgia. And I'm trying to find his game log here. ESPN stats don't make it easy to do anything.
So while you do that,
let's see.
I'll say that the point I'm trying to make is not that Tennessee is a poor rushing team. I think they're very good at it, and they have a good plan. They execute it very well, and they have good players. But I think this isn't one of those like strength on weakness matchups. This is strength against like really good strength for Ohio State. Like, and I don't think any team that their plan is to just run on Ohio State is going to find success. Like, I don't believe that.
I think, okay, so if we go down the list here and you look at Dylan Sampson, on the year, averaged 5.8 yards a carry, 1,485 yards rushing. He averaged 3.8 on 24 carries against Oklahoma, 4.1 on 27 carries against Florida, 5.3 on 26 carries against Bama, and 5.3 on 19 carries against Georgia. So, I mean, he got better as the year went along, and we'll see it. That it is going to be a matchup that I think that Tennessee will try to exploit, because they're probably playing victim a little bit to recency bias, and that's what Michigan did to win the game against Ohio State. So I think maybe there's a reason for the optimism, but again, if I was them, I would probably watch the Oregon game and say that the best way to do it is to set up the run through the pass, but that's me.
So having said all that, which is that I can't argue with your thing or the importance of Cody Simon or Sonny Styles. I think my expectation is Ohio State will stop the run. And so now I'm going back to, a pre-Michigan conversation, which was my level of unease with the cornerback play in Ohio State stopping the pass. Tennessee is not as equipped to do that. They've not as been the Josh Heupel, all verts, air raid style attack. And I know that that's always been complemented by a rushing attack more than it maybe had got credit for going into this year. But, I'm thinking about the credit that they got for, Jalen Hyatts of the world and guys who weren't running a ton of routes, but having a lot of success. And as Ohio State, or as Tennessee, was pushing the football down the field, I think maybe Josh Heupel dials up more of that. And that brings me back to the same doubts about, Davison Igbinosun with penalties. Michigan could not put this to real test. Now, they did complete some passes late in the game that moved the chains, and that was obviously painful and detrimental for the Buckeyes. But with Davison Igbinosun and with Denzel Burke, some of the second half inconsistency that we've seen, and even Jermaine Matthews, when he's come off the bench, has not been consistently delivering at the level that maybe I expected him to going into the year, or even in the middle of the year when it looked like he needed to be more part of the rotation with those two guys, which he has been. Tennessee's going to take those shots. I don't think they're going to be scared to do that. They have a quarterback who's being pretty well compensated to throw the football down the field, and they have a coaching staff that is not opposed to doing so. So I don't know that we put that conversation on the back burner, and then the overall defensive performance was really good against Michigan, but that was a limited and a one-dimensional attack, and that's not what I think Tennessee will try to be in this game.
No, and for Ohio State, I mean, the key, we talked about it a ton after Oregon, is that the pass rush has to go hand in hand with pass coverage. And if you look at this season, Nico Iamaleava was sacked 24 times this year, 3 times against Oregon or against Oklahoma, 4 times against Arkansas, 3 against Florida, 3 against Alabama, 5 against Georgia. Like those are the games where his stats are the worst. So like you have to get after him. And so all these things play together, but it does, I think, start with Ohio State's ability to make them one-dimensional. And that is something they're going to have to do with the linebackers. And clearly Tennessee feels like they're going to be able to establish the run. So that's the first, I think, battle of the game.
Hey, folks, 2 apologies on a 3 Things Thursday. Number 1, for breaking up the show right here. And number 2, that Liberty, the future fans bold predictor, is off again this week. She will be back in time for the playoff to give you some ace predictions about what's going to happen in Ohio State, Tennessee in the Horseshoe. Thanks to Future Fans Sports. I've got the Future Fans box right here, but I wanted to move it up one day off of Freaky Friday, a Future Fans Friday, to tell you that you have 2 days left, December 13th, the final day to use that code Buckeye at futurefans.com/OSU and get 10% off these boxes, all the circle toss, the storybook, the activity, everything going on in there has been awesome. And it is the perfect time to get it ahead of a playoff run, hopefully a lengthy playoff run where you can get through everything in that interactive book and experience the magic of a college football playoff run for Ohio State with your kids and help them understand more of what they're seeing. It's been awesome to do that with Liberty. As you all know, it's been a huge success for us. You don't want to miss it. Futurefans.com/OSU. That code again is Buckeye. Now, thing number 3. Okay, Berm, thing number 3. It's almost like a modified Talkin' Tuesday. You and I are going to talk with Ohio State Athletic Director Ross Bjork. That will be an interview for the Podcast Daily's Freaky Friday. I mean, we'll try and be more serious. I guess we shouldn't say it's going to be a Freaky Friday. It's going to be...
You never know.
Like, I don't know. I guess that could be a thing. We'll figure it out. I'd love it if he wanted to, pop down to Roosters for fun, casual joint, or he's talked about maybe having some bourbon with us. I don't know what's going to happen. That probably won't happen because it's going to be in his office, but we're about to find out. Anyway, thing number 3 is what you most want to talk to Ross Bjork about.
Obviously, I'm always geared towards a roster building perspective and what the money situation is going to be, what they expect from this profit sharing model that's coming. But I'm interested in how they see the football roster numbers changing alongside that, because they're able to go up to 105 scholarships now on the football roster, but we don't expect that to happen. We're not thinking Ohio State's just going to randomly add 20 additional players this offseason. So like, I'm curious how they plan to work with that. What happens to the walk-on / preferred walk-on numbers that are out there, because Ohio State's roster is still 120 some kids. So what happens to those kids? And then from a environment perspective, like what has he already started to put in motion, not just for the playoff game against Tennessee, but he was at Oregon. We heard from a number of people out there that he was like, what in the world? This is crazy. Obviously coming from Texas A&M, which is when you watch a Texas A&M game on TV, it's like nothing I've ever seen. I was listening to the Texas A&M Texas game on the radio on the way home from Ohio State, Michigan 2 weeks ago, and I had to like turn the radio up so I could hear the announcers on the radio over the crowd. So like I'm curious as to what the plan is to unprofessionalize Ohio Stadium and to turn it more into a bee's, a hornet's nest, because I think that Ohio State is the prime example of the professionalism of college sports. We've talked about it for a lot of moments and minutes this year, but I want to know what actually they can do to change that without sacrificing clearly what's very important revenue to the school and the program.
Yeah, that's the delicate balancing act right there, because they need the revenue. Now, does it have to be in-game sponsorships to get that? I don't know. That's the solution that Ross Bjork and his team are going to have to find out. And I think you've mentioned this before in other capacities. Like, this is year one. Ross Bjork is trying to understand the lay of the land and what happens at Ohio State. And you don't know what you don't know till you actually get here. And we're hyper focused on football, and that's not the only part of his job, but it is the most important part of his job, is making sure that that program is successful and making sure that the horseshoe is full and making sure that there is a Big Ten contender and a national title contender playing games on that field every fall. So some of those are all wrapped into one, which is like, what did you learn this year? And like, what are practical solutions that you can take into year two? Because I bet that list is incredibly long. You mentioned the Oregon game, and I know that there were multiple athletic department, staff members taking notes about that and comparing it and being like, and that was an eye-opening experience for them. But that's, that is the tip of the iceberg for what running.
Their fans were cheering at halftime. I mean, I've never seen anything like it.
Well, maybe it's just because it never rains in Eugene, Oregon. I don't know.
I guess. Yeah, possible.
But, I think, and we're also going to, ask about, I don't know what different answer Ross Bjork could provide about his evaluation for Ryan Day or the coaching staff as a whole or any of that stuff. Like, it's unavoidable that conversation, it needs to be had and has to be had by us. It would be foolish not to. And I also say that knowing full well that from where I sit, this year's resume is not complete for Ryan Day and for everybody else. Like, the playoff game is going to determine a lot. And I thought that that Ross Bjork left some wiggle room in the initial statement. We talked about that on the daily earlier this week and also last week, that, I think that that's the only way that you can answer it, is like, we're going to focus on the playoff and then everything else comes after that. And so maybe he will just repeat the same thing. I don't know. But like, that game has to be played, and the portal acquisitions have to be made, and all these other things that are key parts of the discussion here. But, how he responds to the rivalry loss, the first one that was under his watch as the athletic director, those are things that I'm very curious about, because he's been on a ton of podcasts and chatted with a bunch of our colleagues across the Ohio State beat since he arrived. But this will be the first time that you and I have had him on this show. So there's a lot of ground to cover there.
Yeah, I want to get his opinion. So end of the fourth quarter in Columbus against Michigan, he walked up to me on the sideline and he said, "So this is what they mean when they say throw the records out the window in this game, huh?" And I said, "Yep, this is it. This game ruined my life when I was a kid, Ross." So we'll see how it impacts the way he views his job and his responsibilities. And of course, I'm going to ask him if he likes to party.
Yeah, well, do we save that till the end, or are you just going to set the tone with that right away?
I don't know. I guess we'll check out the vibe. If he's offering up some bourbon at the beginning of the interview, then I guess I'll probably just dive right in. But I think it's great. Like, here's the thing: we really had a great relationship with Gene Smith and a really great professional relationship with Gene Smith. I know from what little interaction I've had with Ross Bjork in the 6 months that he's been at Ohio State, that dude loves ball. And I think that, like, more than Gene Smith probably, who obviously was an athlete and very instrumental in building the Ohio State athletic department into what it is. Like, I think that Ross Bjork is someone who is moved by what he sees on the field. And I'm curious to just get his perspective on that after watching this team this year. And if he if it's what he's expected, or if he has any sort of not disappointment in the way things have gone. But I just want to know his evaluation of what he sees, because I know the guy likes football.
Yeah,
I want to know his feelings as a football fan, not as an Ohio State fan. Even though I think his grandmother or mother-in-law is an Ohio State fan or something. So I am interested to see what his response is there.
Yeah, we're going to get into that, and that will be the Freaky Friday version of the podcast daily. So it'll be a little bit different than normal. Bold predictions will be back next week because Ohio State and Tennessee is 8 days away, or will be 8 days away at that point. It's 9 days away right now. Math's not my strong suit, but we will have that for you tomorrow. These, though, have been three things because it's Thursday, and that's Jeremy Birmingham, and I'm Austin Ward, and we appreciate you hanging out with us for a little bit. We'll see you next time as we talk to Ross Bjork on Freaky Friday on the podcast daily. See you there.